What if I told you that a small copper coin, one that many people tossed into jars, drawers, or even parking meters, could quietly hold a secret worth far more than 1 cent? Imagine finding that coin today, realizing it was sitting in your pocket change for years, and discovering collectors are willing to pay hundreds, even thousands of dollars for the right example. It sounds unbelievable, but this is exactly why the 1973 Lincoln penny with no mint mark has become a quiet obsession among serious collectors. And the truth is, most people have no idea what they're holding. Back in 1973, millions of Lincoln pennies were produced in the United States. At first glance, they all looked nearly identical. Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back, a small copper coin that most Americans barely noticed. But hidden among those everyday coins were pieces that would later capture the attention of collectors across the country. The version we're talking about today is the 1973 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. Now, if you've ever looked closely at a coin, you might notice a tiny letter near the date. Sometimes you'll see a D for Denver, sometimes an S for San Francisco. But if there's no letter at all, that means the coin was minted in Philadelphia. And here's where things start to get interesting. Philadelphia produced hundreds of millions of pennies in 1973. So at first, it sounds common, ordinary, nothing special. But collectors know something that most people don't. What truly determines a coin's value isn't just how many were made. It's how many survive in exceptional condition, and whether rare minting errors slipped through the system. Think about it. In 1973, pennies were used everywhere. Gas stations, grocery stores, vending machines. Kids spent them on candy. They bounced around in pockets, scraped against other coins, and wore down over decades. Which means finding a 1973 penny today that still looks nearly perfect is surprisingly rare. And that's where the story starts getting exciting. A few years ago, a man in Ohio was sorting through a jar of old coins he'd inherited from his father. Nothing fancy, just a glass jar filled with pennies collected over decades. At first, he almost ignored them. After all, who expects life-changing value from a handful of pennies? But curiosity got the better of him. He started examining the coins one by one. Most were worn, dark, ordinary. Then suddenly, he noticed one that looked different. The surfaces were brighter, the details sharper. Lincoln's hair strands were crisp. The steps of the Lincoln Memorial on the back were still clearly visible. The date read 1973. And there was no mint mark. At first, he thought nothing of it. But later, after a bit of research, he learned something surprising. In extremely high grades, some 1973 Philadelphia pennies had sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars at auction. That moment changed the way he looked at every coin he owned. But here's the shocking part. Condition is everything. Most 1973 pennies in circulation today are worth exactly what they say on the front, 1 cent. Maybe 2 or 3 cents for the copper value. But if the coin is preserved in near-perfect condition, untouched by decades of wear, the value can jump dramatically. Collectors call this mint state. A mint state coin has no major scratches, no heavy wear, and sharp details that look almost like the day it left the mint. And here's where it gets crazy. Professional grading companies sometimes assign these coins grades like MS65, MS66, or even higher. At those levels, rarity increases rapidly, because very few coins survive decades without damage. When that happens, collectors compete fiercely to own the finest examples. In fact, some top-graded 1973 no-mint mark Lincoln pennies have sold for over $1,000. Think about that for a moment. 1 penny, turning into more than $1,000. Simply because it was preserved better than the rest. But condition isn't the only thing that matters. There's another hidden factor that makes collectors' hearts race. Errors. During the minting process, billions of coins pass through machines at incredible speed. Occasionally, something goes wrong. A die shifts slightly. A strike happens off-center. A doubling effect appears in the lettering. Most of these mistakes are caught and destroyed, but a few escape into circulation. And when they do, collectors go hunting. Some 1973 pennies have been discovered with subtle doubling in the date or lettering. Others show striking anomalies that make them stand out from ordinary coins. These mistakes might look small, but in the coin world, small differences can mean big money. Here's the mistake many people make. They assume old coins are automatically valuable. But age alone doesn't create rarity. Instead, collectors look for three key things: mint marks, errors, and condition. If you ignore those details, you might accidentally spend a coin that collectors would fight to own. And believe it or not, it happens all the time. People drop valuable coins into vending machines. They roll them up and deposit them at the bank. Some even throw them away while cleaning out old drawers. Not because they don't care, but because they simply didn't know what to look for. Now imagine this scenario. You open an old jar of coins that's been sitting in your home for 20 years. Inside are dozens of Lincoln pennies from the 1970s. Most are worn and ordinary, but one of them shines just a little brighter. You flip it over. No mint mark. The surfaces look unusually sharp. The coin hasn't been scratched or worn down like the others. Suddenly a question pops into your mind. Could this be one of those high-grade survivors collectors talk about? That moment of curiosity has started countless collecting journeys. Because once you begin looking closely at coins, you realize something incredible. History is hiding in plain sight. Every penny tells a story about the time it was minted, the economy, the technology, the millions of hands that may have passed it along. But every once in a while, a coin stands out. A coin survives when others didn't. A coin escapes the wear and tear of daily life. And that's the coin collector's chase. The 1973 Lincoln penny with no mint mark may seem ordinary at first glance. But under the right circumstances, with the right condition, or the right minting error, it can transform from pocket change into a prized collectible. And that's why serious collectors never ignore old pennies. Because the next discovery might be hiding in a coffee can in the garage, a forgotten coin album in the attic, or the spare change sitting on your kitchen counter right now. So the next time you come across an old penny, don't rush past it. Take a closer look, check the date. Look for the mint mark or the absence of one. Study the details. Because the truth is simple. Opportunities like this don't come with flashing lights or big announcements. Sometimes they arrive quietly, disguised as a single copper coin worth 1 cent, but to the right person, at the right moment, that little coin could be the beginning of something extraordinary. And once you realize that, you'll never look at pocket change the same way again. What if I told you that a small copper coin, the kind most people toss into a jar, leave in their car, or spend without thinking, could quietly hold a hidden value that surprises even experienced collectors? It sounds unbelievable. Yet every year, stories surface of ordinary people discovering that a simple Lincoln penny in their pocket change was worth far more than 1 cent. And today, we're talking about a coin that many Americans have seen thousands of times, but very few have ever truly looked at. The 1978 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. At first glance, it looks completely ordinary. Just another coin from the late 1970s. A portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front. The Lincoln Memorial on the back. Copper-colored. Worn from decades of circulation. But here's the shocking part. Some of these coins have sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars depending on condition and rare characteristics. And the reason is something most people overlook. Let's step back for a moment. In 1978, the United States Mint was producing billions of pennies to keep up with circulation. Coins were struck in multiple locations, including Denver and Philadelphia. When a penny is minted in Denver, it carries a small D mint mark below the date. But coins produced in Philadelphia during that time usually had no mint mark at all. That means the 1978 Lincoln penny without a mint mark came from the Philadelphia Mint. Now you might be thinking, if millions were made, how could it possibly be valuable? That's the exact question many people ask right before they unknowingly spend one worth far more than face value. Because in coin collecting, value doesn't always come from the date alone. It comes from condition, from rarity within that condition, and sometimes from tiny minting mistakes that almost no one notices. And this is where things start getting interesting. Several years ago, a retired schoolteacher in Ohio decided to clean out an old jar of coins that had been sitting in a kitchen cabinet since the 1980s. Nothing special, just decades of pocket change. Pennies, nickels, dimes. But one coin caught his attention. It looked unusually bright compared to the others. A 1978 penny. No mint mark. Instead of tossing it back into the jar, he decided to take a closer look. He noticed the details on Lincoln's face were incredibly sharp. The surfaces still had a subtle red luster that most circulated coins lose after years of use. Curious, he brought the coin to a local coin shop. The dealer examined it carefully under magnification. Then he paused. Because the coin wasn't just a 1978 penny. It was an exceptionally preserved example, nearly untouched by circulation. And in the world of coin grading, that difference can mean everything. Coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70. The higher the number, the better the condition. Most pennies from the 1970s found in everyday change fall somewhere between grades 10 and 40. But a coin that grades above 65, especially one with original red color, becomes dramatically rarer. That retired teacher's coin eventually received a grade in the high mint state range. Its value? Several $100s. From a coin he almost ignored. But here's where it gets even more surprising. Some of the most valuable 1978 no-mint mark pennies aren't just high-grade coins. They're coins with subtle, minting errors. And collectors absolutely love errors. During the minting process, enormous presses strike blank metal planchets with tremendous force. When something goes slightly wrong during that process, unusual features can appear on the coin. Sometimes it's a doubled image in the lettering. Sometimes a misaligned strike. Occasionally a die crack or die break that creates unexpected shapes in the metal. To most people, these details look like tiny imperfections. To collectors, they can mean rarity, and rarity is what drives value. There have been documented cases where unusual mint errors on otherwise common pennies have pushed their auction prices into the thousands. Yes, thousands. And here's the crazy part. Many of these coins were discovered years later by people simply examining their spare change. Think about that. For a moment, a coin sitting quietly in a drawer for decades, suddenly becoming the center of attention in a collector's auction. But this is where many people make a huge mistake. Actually, several mistakes. The first mistake is cleaning the coin. It might seem logical to polish an old penny to make it look nicer. But in the coin collecting world, cleaning is one of the fastest ways to destroy value. Collectors want originality, natural surfaces, authentic wear. Even gentle cleaning can leave microscopic scratches that reduce a coin's grade and dramatically lower its price. The second mistake is assuming a coin is worthless just because it's common. Yes, billions of 1978 pennies were minted, but very few survived in pristine condition. And even fewer have interesting errors or unusual features. That's why serious collectors carefully search through rolls of pennies, coin jars, and old collections every single day. They know that rare examples still appear in the most ordinary places, and this leads to one fascinating reality. The coins that change someone's life financially often look completely normal at first glance. A penny, a dime, a nickel, small pieces of history that quietly move through millions of hands, until one person finally stops and takes a closer look. Now let's talk about value ranges. A typical circulated 1978 Lincoln penny, without a mint mark, might only be worth a few cents to a collector. Nothing dramatic, but as the condition improves, the value begins to climb. Uncirculated examples with bright original red surfaces can reach tens of dollars. Higher mint state grades can push that number well into the hundreds, and when rare errors or exceptional grading come into play, auction results can jump even higher. That's the moment when collectors start paying very serious attention. Because coins at that level are no longer just spare change. They're historical artifacts with real investment potential. But here's something that surprises a lot of people. Many valuable coins were never discovered when they were first minted. They were discovered decades later, hidden in old piggy banks, forgotten coin rolls, estate collections, shoe boxes in attics, waiting, sometimes for 30, 40, even 50 years. And that raises a powerful question. How many rare coins are still sitting unnoticed in everyday homes across America right now? It's impossible to know. But collectors believe the number is larger than most people imagine, which is exactly why the search never stops. Because every once in a while, someone checks an old jar of pennies and finds something remarkable, something rare, something valuable, something that turns a 1-cent coin into a story worth telling. So the next time you see a 1978 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, don't rush past it. Take a moment. Look at the date. Examine the details. Check the color and condition. Because hidden within the most ordinary objects, sometimes there are extraordinary surprises. And opportunities like that don't appear every day. In fact, sometimes they only appear once in a lifetime, which means the next coin you check could be the one everyone else missed. What if I told you that a single penny, the kind most people toss into a jar or leave in a cup holder, could quietly hold a story worth thousands of dollars. Maybe even more. It sounds unbelievable. After all, it's just a penny. 1 cent. The smallest coin in American currency. But history has shown something fascinating about coins. Sometimes the pieces people ignore the most turn out to be the ones collectors fight over years later. And today we're talking about one of those coins. The 1979 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. At first glance, it looks completely ordinary. Copper-colored. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile on the front. The Lincoln Memorial standing proudly on the back. Millions of Americans carried this coin in their pockets during the late 1970s. But what most people don't know is that some of these pennies quietly slipped through history carrying surprising value. And here's where it gets interesting. Back in 1979, the United States Mint was producing enormous numbers of pennies. The country needed coins for everyday transactions, and billions were struck that year. Many were made at the Philadelphia Mint. Now, coins from Philadelphia during that era often had no mint mark at all. So when people see a 1979 penny with no mint mark, they assume it's common. They assume it's worth exactly 1 cent. They toss it into a jar, spend it at a gas station, or forget about it completely. But collectors know something different, because hidden within those billions of coins are a handful of pieces that are far more valuable than their tiny denomination suggests. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, a man in Ohio was cleaning out his late father's old toolbox. Inside was a small coffee can filled with loose change. Pennies, nickels, dimes, the kind of everyday coins families accumulate over decades. Most people would glance at the coins and dump them into a bank machine. But this man paused. He remembered hearing that certain Lincoln pennies could be worth real money, so he started looking closer. He spread the coins across his kitchen table and began examining the dates. 1971, 1964, 1983. Dozens of ordinary pennies. Then one caught his eye at no mint mark. At first, he almost skipped past it. After all, millions were made. But something looked different. The coin had unusually sharp detail. Lincoln's hair strands were crisp. The surfaces had a soft reddish glow, and the edges looked almost untouched by circulation. Instead of tossing it aside, he did something very smart. He had the coin professionally graded. When the results came back, he was stunned. The penny graded at a very high mint state level, a condition so pristine that only a tiny fraction of surviving coins reach it, and suddenly that 1 cent coin was worth hundreds of dollars to collectors. Now here's the shocking part. Condition is everything. Most 1979 no mint mark Lincoln pennies were heavily circulated. They passed through vending machines, grocery stores, parking meters, and piggy banks for decades. Those worn coins? They're usually worth only a few cents, but when a coin survives in exceptional condition, untouched, almost perfect, collectors start paying attention, and prices can climb dramatically. But that's only part of the story. Because occasionally, something else happens during the minting process, a tiny mechanical hiccup. A die misalignment, a striking mistake, and suddenly, an ordinary penny becomes something much rarer. Collectors search carefully for things like doubled letters in the date or inscriptions, off-center strikes, or unusual surface details created during the minting process. These errors are like fingerprints. They turn a common coin into a unique collectible, and here's where it gets crazy. Sometimes the difference between a normal penny and a valuable one can be so small that most people miss it completely. A slightly doubled number, a subtle shift in lettering, a small off-center strike. Blink, and you'd never notice. But collectors do, and when they find one, they know they've discovered something special. Now think about this for a moment. The average American household has jars of loose change sitting somewhere. Kitchen drawers, old coffee cans, piggy banks that haven't been opened in years. Inside those jars could easily be dozens, maybe hundreds of Lincoln pennies from the 1970s, including 1979. And most people never check them. They assume every penny is the same. But collectors know better, because occasionally, just occasionally, one of those overlooked coins turns out to be worth far more than anyone expected. And here's another mistake people make. They clean their coins. It seems logical, right? A shiny coin must be worth more. But in the coin collecting world, cleaning a coin can actually destroy its value. Collectors want original surfaces, natural aging, Authentic condition. A harshly cleaned coin can lose most of its collector value instantly. That's why experts always say the same thing. If you think you've found an unusual coin, leave it exactly as it is, no polishing, no scrubbing. Just careful storage and proper evaluation. Because sometimes the smallest details make the biggest difference. Another thing collectors watch closely is color. Lincoln pennies made before 1982 were mostly copper. And over time, copper coins develop different shades. Some turn brown. Some develop darker tones from circulation. But occasionally, a coin remains bright red, almost like it just left the mint. These red mint-state coins are extremely attractive to collectors, and when a 1979 no-mint mark penny survives with that original red color and nearly perfect surfaces, that's when auction prices can start climbing, hundreds of dollars, sometimes more. All for a coin most people would overlook without a second thought. But beyond the money, there's something deeper about coin collecting. Every coin carries history. The year 1979 was a fascinating time in America. The country was navigating economic challenges. Gas prices were rising. Technology was evolving. Families were building their futures, and during that entire year, billions of Lincoln pennies were quietly entering circulation. Each one passing from hand to hand, store to store, pocket to pocket. Most were spent and forgotten, but a few survived, hidden away in collections, jars, drawers, and forgotten containers, waiting for someone curious enough to take a closer look. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you checked the pennies sitting around your home? Really checked them? Looked at the dates. Examined the details. Because the truth is, opportunities like this don't announce themselves. They hide in plain sight, a 1-cent coin sitting quietly among dozens of others, until one day, someone notices, and suddenly that overlooked piece of copper becomes a fascinating piece of history, and sometimes a surprisingly valuable one. So the next time you see a 1979 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, don't ignore it, turn it over, look closely at the condition, check the lettering, study the details, because the difference between an ordinary penny and a collector's prize can be incredibly small, and the person who discovers that difference could be holding far more than 1 cent in their hand. Moments like that are why collectors keep searching, why they examine jars of coins late at night, why they pay attention to the details others miss, because every once in a while, someone finds something extraordinary, and who knows, the next incredible discovery might already be sitting in your pocket change. Take a look, because opportunities like this don't last forever. What if I told you that a single penny, the kind most people toss into a jar, drop in a parking lot, or leave forgotten in a drawer, could quietly hold the power to change someone's financial future? It sounds unbelievable, but for some collectors, that exact moment has already happened. And today we're uncovering the mystery behind one of the most overlooked coins still hiding in plain sight. The 1987 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. At first glance, this coin looks completely ordinary. It's small, copper-colored, and features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln that Americans have seen for generations. Millions of people have handled this coin without a second thought. But what most people don't realize is that a few specific versions of this humble 1987 penny can become incredibly desirable to collectors, especially when certain rare details appear. And here's where the story begins. Several years ago, a retired schoolteacher from Ohio was sorting through an old jar of coins she had collected for decades. Nothing special, just pocket change she had tossed aside after grocery trips and coffee stops. As she poured the pennies onto the table, one coin caught her eye. A 1987 Lincoln cent. No mint mark. It looked slightly sharper than the others, almost glowing under the kitchen light. Curious, she decided to take it to a local coin shop. What happened next shocked her. The dealer leaned forward, examined the coin carefully, and said something that made her heart race. This wasn't just another penny. Depending on its condition, it could be worth far more than 1 cent, but here's the part that surprises many people. A 1987 Lincoln penny, without a mint mark, was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. That means millions were made. So why would collectors care? The answer lies in details most people never notice. Coin collectors look for 3 powerful factors: condition, rarity, and mistakes. And sometimes those three things collide in ways that transform a simple coin into something extraordinary. Let's start with condition. Most 1987 pennies have spent decades circulating through gas stations, vending machines, and cash registers. They're scratched, dull, and worn down from years of use. In that condition, they're usually worth only a few cents. But a pristine example, one that looks almost brand new, is a completely different story. Collectors call these coins mint state. They have sharp details, bright surfaces, and minimal wear. And when a coin from the 1980s survives in nearly perfect condition, the price can climb dramatically. Some high-grade examples of the 1987 Lincoln penny without a mint mark have sold for tens, even hundreds of dollars at auction. And that's just the beginning, because here's where it gets crazy. Errors. Coin errors happen during the minting process. A machine misaligns. A die cracks. A metal blank shifts slightly at the wrong moment. And suddenly, a tiny mistake is frozen forever into metal. These accidents create coins that collectors actively hunt for. Imagine finding a penny where Lincoln's portrait appears doubled, or the letters in Liberty look slightly duplicated, or the coin appears slightly off-center. These subtle errors can turn an ordinary penny into a highly sought-after collectible, and believe it or not, some collectors have discovered valuable error coins simply by checking the change in their pockets. Think about that for a moment. A coin that once bought a piece of gum, suddenly worth hundreds of dollars, just because someone decided to look closer. But mistakes aren't the only thing collectors search for. There's another detail that can make the 1987 penny particularly interesting. The metal composition. In the early 1980s, the U.S. Mint changed the composition of pennies from mostly copper to zinc with a thin copper coating. This change created subtle differences in weight, color, and durability. While most 1987 pennies follow the standard zinc composition, collectors sometimes encounter unusual examples with striking abnormalities, including plating errors where the copper layer appears uneven, bubbled, or missing. These strange-looking coins often catch the attention of specialists, and sometimes they sell for far more than anyone expected. But here's the shocking part many people miss. Millions of Americans still have jars, boxes, and containers filled with old coins sitting quietly in their homes right now. They've been forgotten in closets, inherited from relatives, or tucked away during moves. Inside those containers could be coins that collectors would gladly pay real money for, and most people never check. Why? Because it's just a penny. But history has proven something remarkable. Time and time again, ordinary people discover valuable coins in the most unexpected places. A mechanic in Texas once found a rare coin while cleaning his truck's cup holder. A grandmother in Pennsylvania discovered a valuable penny inside a jar she had kept since the 1970s. A teenager searching through change rolls from the bank uncovered an error coin that collectors quickly noticed. These stories might sound unbelievable, but they happen more often than you think. And the 1987 Lincoln penny without a mint mark is one of those coins that quietly slips through people's hands every single day. Which leads to an important warning. Collectors often make a simple but costly mistake. They assume that if a coin looks common, it must be worthless, so they spend it, or they ignore it, or they toss it back into circulation. But experienced collectors know the truth. The smallest details can make the biggest difference. A slightly sharper strike, a small minting error, an unusually high-grade example. These tiny details are what transform everyday coins into treasures. And here's the part that really blows collectors away. When a coin survives decades in exceptional condition, its rarity increases dramatically. Because most coins don't survive that long without wear. They get scratched, bent, damaged. So when a nearly flawless 1987 Lincoln penny appears, collectors take notice. Auction houses, grading companies, and professional dealers carefully examine these coins under magnification. If the coin earns a high grade, its value can multiply quickly. And that's exactly why serious collectors study even the most ordinary coins. Because hidden value doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it hides quietly in plain sight. Right now, somewhere in America, someone is opening a drawer, cleaning a garage, or counting spare change, and they have no idea that a small copper-colored coin could be worth far more than they imagine. Maybe it's sitting in a coin jar. Maybe it's buried in a piggy bank. Maybe it's mixed with hundreds of other pennies waiting to be noticed. The truth is simple. Opportunities like this don't always look exciting at first. They look ordinary. Until someone decides to take a closer look. So the next time you see a 1987 Lincoln penny without a mint mark, don't ignore it. Turn it over. Check the details. Look at the date, the letters, the shine. Because sometimes the smallest discoveries lead to the biggest surprises. And who knows? The coin sitting quietly in your pocket right now might be worth far more than a single-cent. Collectors understand one powerful lesson. Value often hides where no one else bothers to look, and if history has taught us anything, it's that life-changing discoveries often begin with something incredibly small. So before you spend that next penny, take a second look, because opportunities like this don't last forever. What if I told you that a small copper coin from 1988, a coin so ordinary that millions of Americans ignored it, could quietly be hiding in a jar, a drawer, or even the loose change in your car, and that one tiny detail on that coin might mean the difference between 1 cent and thousands of dollars. It sounds unbelievable. But collectors have learned a powerful lesson over the years. Some of the most valuable coins in America were never meant to be rare. They were simply overlooked. And the 1988 Lincoln penny with no mint mark is one of those coins that has quietly sparked curiosity among collectors who know where to look. Because sometimes, the most ordinary coins hide the most extraordinary secrets. In 1988, millions of Lincoln pennies were produced for circulation across the United States. At first glance, these pennies looked just like every other coin Americans had seen for decades. The familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back. A simple design that had been part of everyday life since 1959. But here's something most people don't realize. The presence or absence of a mint mark can completely change the story of a coin. Coins produced in Philadelphia traditionally carried no mint mark during that time. That means a 1988 penny without a mint mark was minted in Philadelphia. And because so many were made, most people assume these coins are worthless. That assumption is exactly why valuable coins slip through people's hands every single day. Because collectors don't just look at the date. They look at the details. And this is where the mystery begins. Imagine a man cleaning out his late grandfather's garage in Ohio. Dusty boxes, old tools, and a few forgotten jars of coins collected over decades. He almost threw them into a coin-counting machine at the grocery store. But something made him pause. He remembered hearing that certain pennies could be worth money, so instead of dumping the coins into the machine, he sat down at the kitchen table and started looking through them one by one. Most were ordinary. But then he spotted it. A 1988 penny with no mint mark. At first, he thought nothing of it. After all, there were plenty of Philadelphia pennies. But something about the coin looked unusually sharp. The surfaces were bright. The details in Lincoln's hair were crisp. It looked almost untouched. That moment of curiosity changed everything. Because coin collectors understand something that casual observers often miss. Condition can transform a common coin into a valuable collectible. Most 1988 pennies circulated heavily. They passed through vending machines, cash registers, and pockets for years. They became scratched, dull, and worn. But a coin that somehow avoided circulation, a coin preserved in near-perfect condition, can become incredibly desirable. Professional coin grading services measure this condition on a scale from 1 to 70. And here's where things start to get interesting. A heavily circulated 1988 penny without a mint mark might be worth exactly what you expect. 1 cent, but a high-grade example, one that appears nearly flawless, can sell for far more than people imagine. And collectors are always searching for the best examples possible. But wait, because the story doesn't end there. In fact, this is where things get even more fascinating. Most people look at the front of the coin and stop there. But experienced collectors flip the coin over and inspect every tiny detail. Why? Because hidden variations and minting quirks can sometimes create coins that are far rarer than the average person realizes. For example, subtle differences in lettering, alignment, or striking. Pressure can make certain coins stand out. These are the kinds of details that send collectors into a frenzy, and occasionally, a simple penny becomes the center of intense bidding among buyers who understand exactly what they are looking at. But here's the shocking part. Many people accidentally destroy the value of their coins without realizing it. They clean them. They polish them. They try to make them shiny. And in the world of coin collecting, that can be the worst mistake possible. Cleaning a coin can permanently damage its surface, removing the natural patina that collectors value. A coin that might have been worth hundreds or more can instantly drop in value. That's why serious collectors handle coins carefully, often by the edges, and store them safely. Because preservation is everything, and this is what blows many people away. Even modern coins like the 1988 Lincoln penny can become desirable if the right combination of factors comes together. Sharp strike, brilliant surfaces, minimal marks, perfect color. When a coin checks all those boxes, collectors take notice, and, suddenly, a coin that millions of people ignored becomes something special. But let's pause for a moment and ask a simple question. How many people have jars of pennies sitting somewhere in their home right now? Maybe in the kitchen drawer, maybe in a piggy bank from years ago, maybe in a forgotten box in the garage. Most people assume those coins are just spare change. But history has proven again and again that hidden treasures sometimes sit right in front of us. There have been stories of collectors finding valuable coins in pocket change, in bank rolls, even in everyday transactions at the grocery store. The thrill of discovery is part of what makes coin collecting so powerful, because every coin carries a story: where it traveled, who used it, and whether it might be hiding something extraordinary. And this is where the emotional side of collecting really begins. For many Americans, coin collecting is more than a hobby. It's a connection to history, a chance to build something meaningful, and, sometimes, a chance to create unexpected financial opportunity. Imagine discovering that a coin you almost ignored could help pay for a vacation, reduce debt, or even help secure a better future for your family. It has happened before. And that possibility is exactly why collectors continue searching through old coins every single day. But here's something important to remember. Not every 1988 penny will be valuable. The vast majority are ordinary. But the rare, high-quality examples, the ones that survived decades in remarkable condition, those are the coins collectors compete for, and the difference between ordinary and extraordinary often comes down to a few tiny details. Details that most people never notice, which raises an intriguing question. What might be hiding in your own coin jar right now? A worn penny worth a single cent, or a pristine survivor that collectors would love to own? The truth is, you won't know until you look. And that simple act, checking your coins, has changed lives. Because opportunity doesn't always arrive in obvious ways. Sometimes it arrives disguised as something small, copper-colored, and easily overlooked. A simple penny from 1988. So the next time you see loose change sitting on the table, don't ignore it. Take a closer look. Check the date. Check the mint mark, or the absence of one. Look at the condition, because hidden among millions of ordinary coins, there are always a few that stand out. And the people who discover them are usually the ones who took the time to look. Remember, opportunities like this don't last forever. Coins get lost, spent, and damaged every single day. But the rare survivors continue to rise in demand as collectors search for the best examples. Which means the next valuable coin might already be out there, waiting quietly to be discovered. Maybe in a forgotten jar. Maybe in your pocket. Or maybe in the next penny you almost walk past. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a penny, and almost tossing it aside without a second thought. It looks ordinary, feels ordinary. But what if that tiny copper-colored coin quietly carried a story that collectors across the country are still searching for? What if a simple penny from 1989 could actually be worth far more than 1 cent? Today, we're taking a closer look at the 1989 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. At first glance, it seems like just another coin from everyday pocket change. Millions of Americans used these coins without ever thinking twice about them. But for coin collectors and history lovers, this particular penny represents a fascinating piece of American coinage history. The Lincoln penny is one of the most recognizable coins ever produced in the United States. It was first introduced in 1909 to celebrate the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. This was a historic moment because it was the first time a real person appeared on a circulating U.S. coin. Before that, coins featured symbolic figures like Lady Liberty instead of actual historical figures. The design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. On the front of the coin, also known as the obverse, you can see the detailed portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. Above his head is the word liberty, and the phrase "In God we trust." curves along the top edge. On the right side of Lincoln's profile is the year the coin was minted. Now let's move to the reverse side. In 1989, the back of the Lincoln penny still featured the classic Wheat to Memorial era design known as the Lincoln Memorial Reverse. This design had been used since 1959 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. The Lincoln Memorial Building is shown in the center, and if you look very closely at a well-preserved coin, you can actually see a tiny image of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. The words United States of America appear across the top of the reverse, while 1 cent is boldly written at the bottom. Just above the memorial, you'll see the national motto E pluribus unum, which means, out of many, one. Now here's where the story becomes interesting. The 1989 Lincoln penny sometimes appears without a mint mark. For many people who are new to coin collecting, this can be confusing. They might assume that the missing mint mark is a rare error. But in most cases, the absence of a mint mark actually tells us something very specific about where the coin was made. A 1989 penny with no mint mark was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. For many years, coins struck in Philadelphia did not include a mint mark at all. That means millions of pennies from Philadelphia simply show the date without any letter underneath it. So if you find a 1989 penny without a mint mark, you're most likely holding a coin produced in Philadelphia. During that year, the Philadelphia Mint produced more than 7 billion Lincoln cents. That massive production number means most of these coins are still very common today. However, that doesn't mean every 1989 penny is worth just 1 cent. Condition plays a huge role in coin value. When collectors talk about coins, they often use the word grade to describe how well preserved a coin is. A coin that has spent decades in circulation usually shows scratches, fading details, and wear along the edges. But occasionally, a coin survives in near-perfect condition. Coins that remain bright, sharp, and almost untouched are known as mint state coins. These are the types collectors love to find. A 1989 no-mint mark penny in typical circulated condition might only be worth a few cents. But a high-grade mint state example can sell for much more. In fact, some certified mint state 1989 pennies have sold for several dollars, sometimes even higher depending on their quality. Professional grading companies examine coins under magnification and assign them a number on a scale that ranges from 1 to 70. Coins graded in the mid to upper 60s can attract serious interest from collectors. But there's another factor that can make a coin far more valuable: errors. Mint errors happen when something goes wrong during the coin production process. Even though the United States Mint uses highly advanced machinery, mistakes can still occur. When they do, collectors often become very interested. Some 1989 pennies have been discovered with small but noticeable minting errors. One example is the double die error. This happens when the coin design is accidentally impressed twice during the die creation process, creating a slight doubling effect on letters or numbers. On certain coins, you might notice doubling in words like liberty or in God we trust. Another type of error collectors search for is an off-center strike. This happens when the coin blank is not perfectly aligned during the striking process, causing part of the design to appear shifted toward the edge. There are also coins known as broad strikes, where the coin is struck without the collar that normally shapes its edge. This can make the coin appear wider than normal. While most 1989 pennies were struck correctly, these rare error versions can be significantly more valuable. Depending on the type of error and the condition of the coin, some collectors have paid anywhere from $20 to several $100s for unique examples. Point 1. Particularly interesting area collector study is the metal composition of the coin. By 1989, Lincoln pennies were no longer made mostly of copper. In 1982, the United States Mint switched the composition to a zinc core with a thin copper coating. This change was made because the rising price of copper made the older composition too expensive to produce. That means a 1989 penny is made of about 97.5% zinc and only 2.5% copper plating. Even though the coin looks like solid copper, the inside is mostly zinc. This change also created another unusual collecting category. Over time, the copper plating on some zinc pennies can wear away or bubble slightly due to environmental conditions. While these coins aren't necessarily rare, collectors sometimes enjoy studying these natural aging effects. If you're curious about checking your own coins, identifying a 1989 no mint mark penny is fairly simple. First, look at the date on the front of the coin. Make sure it clearly reads 1989. Then look just below the date. If there is no letter such as D or S, the coin came from the Philadelphia Mint. Next, examine the coin carefully under good lighting. Look for unusual features like doubled letters, uneven edges, or parts of the design that seem slightly misaligned. A magnifying glass can be very helpful when checking for these details. Another important step is comparing your coin to verified examples from trusted coin resources. Professional coin grading companies often publish high-resolution images of known varieties and errors. It's also important to remember that real rarity usually comes from a combination of factors. The coin must be authentic, it must have a recognized error or extremely high grade, and it must appeal to collectors who want it for their collections. One fascinating fact about the Lincoln penny is how long this design has lasted. While many coin designs change every few decades, the Lincoln cent has been part of American daily life for more than a century. Generations of Americans have used these coins for everything from buying candy to filling piggy banks. The year 1989 itself was also an interesting time in history. The world was changing rapidly. The Cold War was nearing its end, the Berlin Wall would fall later that year, and technology was beginning to transform everyday life. Yet through all those changes, the humble Lincoln penny continued to pass quietly from hand to hand. Collectors often love coins not just because of their value, but because of the stories they carry. Every coin travels through countless pockets, wallets, and cash registers. Some coins are lost, others are saved, and a few eventually find their way into collections where they are preserved for future generations. For many collectors, searching through everyday change is part of the excitement. The idea that a valuable coin could still be hiding in plain sight makes the hobby both thrilling and accessible. Even today, people still discover interesting coins in old jars, inherited collections, or rolls of coins from the bank. Occasionally, a coin that seemed completely ordinary turns out to have a rare feature that collectors are eager to own. The 1989 no-mint mark Lincoln penny may not be the rarest coin ever produced, but it remains a small and meaningful piece of American history. For collectors, it represents a moment in the long timeline of the Lincoln cent series. For beginners, it's often one of the first coins they learn to examine closely. And that's part of what makes coin collecting so fascinating. A tiny object that most people overlook can open the door to history, craftsmanship, and discovery. So the next time you receive a handful of change, take a closer look before you spend it. That ordinary-looking penny might have traveled through decades of American life. And just maybe, one small detail could turn a 1-cent coin into a story worth far more than its face value. What if I told you that a simple penny from 1989, a coin many people have tossed into jars, drawers, and parking lot trays, could quietly hold far more value than anyone ever imagined? A coin so common on the surface that millions ignored it. Yet, in the right condition, with the right details, it can turn an ordinary moment into something unforgettable. And here's the frightening part. Thousands of people may have already spent one without ever realizing what they had in their hand. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you received change at a grocery store, dropped the coins into your pocket, and never looked at them again? For most people, a penny is just a penny. But collectors know something the average person doesn't. Sometimes the smallest coins hide the biggest surprises. And the 1989 Lincoln penny with no mint mark is one of those quiet mysteries that keeps collectors checking their pocket change again and again. Because hidden among billions of ordinary coins, there are a few that stand apart. And when one shows up in exceptional condition, the value can shock even experienced collectors. The story of this coin begins in 1989, when the United States Mint was producing Lincoln cents in massive numbers. The Philadelphia Mint struck billions of pennies that year, and unlike coins from Denver or San Francisco, many of them carried no mint mark at all. That's why when people see a 1989 penny without a mint mark, they often assume it must be rare. But here's where things get interesting. Not all no mint mark coins are rare. In fact, most 1989 pennies without a mint mark are perfectly normal coins produced in Philadelphia. And because so many were made, the majority of them are only worth 1 cent. But don't stop listening yet, because this is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Collectors don't just look at the date. They look at the condition. They look at tiny details, and sometimes they find something extraordinary. Imagine a man in Ohio sorting through an old jar of pennies that had been sitting in his kitchen cabinet for nearly 20 years. Most of the coins were dull, worn, and completely ordinary. But one coin caught his eye. It was bright, sharp, almost untouched by time. A 1989 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, but in near-perfect condition. He sent it to a professional grading service, expecting maybe a small premium. What came back surprised him. The coin had been graded at an extremely high mint state level, meaning it had survived for decades with almost no wear. And suddenly, that tiny coin worth 1 cent had a value collectors were willing to pay hundreds of dollars for, sometimes even more, and that's because high-grade coins from everyday circulation are incredibly hard to find. Think about how pennies are treated. They get tossed into jars, scraped across counters, and worn down in pockets. Very few survive in pristine condition. That's why collectors compete fiercely for the best examples. But condition is only part of the mystery, because occasionally, something else appears on these coins. Errors, and errors can transform an ordinary coin into something collectors desperately want. During the minting process, coins are struck using powerful presses and carefully engraved dies. But machines are not perfect. Sometimes a die is misaligned. Sometimes a strike is slightly off-center. Sometimes the design is doubled in a way that shouldn't exist. And when those rare mistakes happen, collectors take notice. There have been 1989 Lincoln pennies discovered with striking abnormalities, die cracks, off-center strikes, and other unusual features. Most people overlook these tiny details. Collectors hunt for them. And this is where things get crazy. A single mint error on the right coin can push its value far beyond what anyone expects. But here's the mistake that thousands of people make every year. They find an older penny, glance at the date, and assume they know its value. Then they spend it or toss it back into circulation, without checking the details, without looking at the condition, without realizing that. Collectors evaluate coins very differently than the average person. To a collector, the difference between a worn coin and a flawless coin can mean the difference between 1 cent and hundreds of dollars. Sometimes even more if the coin has a unique story or unusual minting characteristic. Now here's a question that might surprise you. How many 1989 pennies are still sitting in jars, piggy banks, or forgotten boxes across America? Millions, maybe tens of millions, and among them could be coins that have never been closely examined, coins that have survived decades in near-perfect shape, coins that collectors would love to add to their collections. And this is exactly why serious collectors still check pennies every single day. Because history has proven something again and again. Rare coins are often discovered by ordinary people, in the most ordinary places. A coffee can full of change. A garage sale box. A forgotten coin album. Moments that seem completely unimportant, until someone takes a closer look. But here's the shocking part many people don't realize. The coin itself may not look special at first. The secret is often in the tiny details. The sharpness of Lincoln's hair. The brightness of the copper surface. The absence of scratches or wear. Professional graders analyze these details carefully, assigning a numerical grade that determines the coin's rarity in that condition. And the higher the grade, the fewer coins exist at that level. That scarcity is what drives collectors to pay serious money. So when someone finds a nearly perfect 1989 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, it suddenly becomes much more than loose change. It becomes a collectible piece of American history. And that's what makes coin collecting so fascinating. It turns everyday objects into hidden treasures. It reminds us that value is not always obvious. Sometimes it's sitting quietly in the palm of your hand, waiting for someone curious enough to look closer. So the next time you receive change, pause for a moment. Look at the pennies. Check the dates. Look for the small details most people ignore. Because somewhere out there, someone will eventually discover the next remarkable coin hiding in plain sight. And the person who finds it may simply be the one who decided to take a second look. Maybe it's in an old jar in your kitchen. Maybe it's in a box of coins passed down from family. Or maybe it's in the very next handful of change you receive. 1 small coin. 1 moment of curiosity. 1 discovery that could change the way you see every penny forever. Because opportunities like this don't come with flashing lights or warning signs. They appear quietly, disguised as something ordinary. And sometimes the difference between missing that opportunity and discovering it is simply taking the time to look. What if I told you that a simple penny the kind most people toss into a jar or drop between couch cushions, could secretly hold the power to change someone's financial future. It sounds impossible. After all, it's just 1 cent. Most people wouldn't even bend down to pick it up off the sidewalk. But every year, collectors quietly search through thousands of pennies, hoping to find one small detail that separates an ordinary coin from a hidden treasure. And one coin that keeps appearing in those stories is the 2006 Lincoln penny with the small letter D mint marked at first glance. It looks completely normal. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back. Copper color, simple design, nothing flashy. Millions of Americans have held one without giving it a second thought. But here's the shocking part that in the world of coin collecting, tiny details can transform an ordinary penny into something collectors will pay serious money for. Sometimes hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands, and in rare situations even more. And that possibility is exactly why people across the country still check their pocket change today. To understand why this coin matters, we have to go back to 2006. That year, the United States Mint produced Lincoln cents at several facilities, including the Denver Mint. Coins struck in Denver carry a small D mint mark just beneath the date. On paper, millions of these coins were produced, which means most of them are still only worth 1 cent, but coin collecting isn't about the average coin, it's about the unusual one. The overlooked one. The one with a story hiding in plain sight. And this is where things start to get interesting. A few years ago, a man in the Midwest was sorting through a container of loose change that had been sitting in his garage for over a decade. It was the kind of jar many families have, filled slowly with coins from grocery stores, gas stations, and spare pocket change. He wasn't expecting anything valuable. In fact, he was just trying to roll the coins and deposit them at the bank. But one penny caught his attention. It was a 2006 Lincoln penny with the Denver Mint mark. Nothing unusual at first, until he noticed the surface looked slightly different. The lettering seemed sharper than the others. The strike looked unusually strong. Curious, he brought the coin to a local coin shop. The dealer examined it carefully under magnification. Then he smiled, because what the man had found was a near-perfect uncirculated example. A coin that had somehow avoided scratches, wear, and damage for years. In coin collecting, condition is everything. A penny that's been passed from hand to hand for years might only be worth its face value. But the same coin, preserved in pristine condition, can suddenly become desirable to collectors building high-grade sets. And that's when the conversation changed. Instead of 1 cent, the dealer estimated the coin could sell for dozens, even hundreds of dollars depending on professional grading. All from a coin that had been sitting in a jar. But condition is only one piece of the puzzle, because sometimes the real value appears when something goes wrong during the minting process. And here's where it gets crazy. Every year, the mint produces billions of coins using high-speed machines. Planchets move through presses at incredible speeds. Dies strike the metal with enormous pressure. Most coins come out exactly as planned, but occasionally, small mistakes slip through. Collectors call them mint errors. A slightly doubled design, a misaligned strike, an off-center image, or subtle die varieties that only appear on a limited number of coins. And when those errors happen on coins like the 2006 D Lincoln penny, collectors pay attention. Because mistakes from the mint are like fingerprints, they're unique. And once collectors discover them, the demand can rise quickly. What most people don't realize is that some valuable coins have been sitting unnoticed in circulation for years before collectors identify them. Which means the next rare example could already be hiding. Somewhere, in a drawer, a piggy bank, or even your own pocket. But there's another mistake people make that can destroy a coin's value instantly. Cleaning it sounds harmless. Many people believe polishing a coin will make it more valuable. In reality, it does the opposite. Collectors and grading companies prefer coins exactly as they are found. The original surface, even if slightly toned, tells the coin's true history. Once a coin is cleaned, tiny scratches appear under magnification, and collectors can spot it immediately. That simple mistake has turned many potentially valuable coins back into ordinary change. And this is why experienced collectors always follow one rule: never clean a coin. Just store it safely and let professionals evaluate it. Now let's talk about grading, because this is where the difference between a common coin and a collectible one becomes dramatic. Professional grading services examine coins under powerful magnification and assign them a numerical grade from 1 to 70. Most coins in circulation fall somewhere between 10 and 40 on that scale. But coins that have been preserved perfectly, coins with no visible wear, can reach grades in the high 60s. And collectors compete fiercely for those top grades. A circulated 2006 Lincoln penny might be worth exactly 1 cent, but a flawless example graded near the top of the scale can sell for dramatically higher amounts because collectors need those perfect pieces to complete their sets. That's the strange magic of coin collecting. Point 2 coins with the same date, the same mint mark, the same design. Yet one might be pocket change, and the other becomes a collector's prize. But here's something even more surprising. Sometimes the value of a coin isn't just about rarity or condition, it's about timing. The coin market moves constantly. New collectors enter the hobby. Certain dates become popular. Registry competitions push collectors to hunt for the highest graded coins available. When demand rises and supply stays limited, prices can move quickly. That's why experienced collectors always say the same thing. Check everything. Every roll of pennies. Every jar of change. Every forgotten coin tucked inside a drawer. Because history has shown that incredible discoveries often come from the most ordinary places. A penny jar at a cash register. Even the floor of a car. And imagine the moment when someone realizes the coin they almost ignored, the coin they nearly spent on a cup of coffee, is actually something collectors are searching for. It's not just about the money, it's about the discovery. The thrill of realizing that hidden value can exist in everyday life. And the truth is, millions of 2006 Lincoln pennies with the Denver mint mark are still out there. Most will always remain ordinary coins, but a few, the ones with exceptional condition, unusual varieties, or mint errors, could be worth far more than their face value. Which leads to one final question. How many people have already spent valuable coins without realizing it? How many rare pennies have quietly passed through gas stations, grocery stores, and vending machines? Simply because no one looked closely enough. That possibility is exactly what keeps collectors searching. And tonight, somewhere in America, someone might be opening an old jar of coins, turning over a small copper penny, noticing the date, noticing that tiny D, mint mark, and wondering if they've just discovered something special. So the next time you see a penny, don't ignore it. Look at the date. Look for the mint mark. Pay attention to the details most people overlook. Because sometimes the smallest coin can carry the biggest surprise. And opportunities like that don't last forever. What if I told you that a single penny, a coin so small most people wouldn't even bend down to pick it up, could hold the power to completely change someone's financial future? It sounds impossible. After all, it's just 1 cent. Most people toss pennies into jars, drop them into couch cushions, or spend them without a second thought. But hidden among millions of ordinary coins, there are a few that carry stories collectors dream about. Coins that quietly travel through pocket change while their true value remains unknown. And one of those coins might be the 2007 Lincoln penny with a D mint mark. Yes, the same penny that may have passed through your hands countless times. But here's the shocking part. Most people who find one never realize what they're holding. Because the real value isn't always obvious. It's hidden in the details, the condition, and sometimes, in tiny minting mistakes that transform a simple copper coin into something collectors are willing to pay serious money for. Let's rewind for a moment. In 2007, the United States Mint produced billions of Lincoln pennies. These coins featured the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front, a design that has existed since 1909. The small letter D beneath the date indicates the coin was struck at the Denver Mint. On the surface, nothing about the 2007 D Lincoln penny seems unusual. Millions were made, millions were spent. But history has shown something fascinating about modern coins. Even in years when billions are produced, a few rare pieces slip through the minting process. Coins struck with subtle errors, coins preserved in pristine condition. Coins that collectors later discover and suddenly realize are far more valuable than anyone expected. And this is where the story becomes interesting. A few years ago, a man cleaning out his late father's garage discovered a dusty coffee can filled with pennies. Nothing unusual, just decades of spare change. Most people would dump the coins into a machine and walk away with a few dollars. But curiosity got the better of him. He began looking through the coins one by one. Old dates, worn edges, mostly ordinary pieces. Then he noticed a penny that looked different. It was bright, almost untouched, as if it had barely circulated. The date read 2007. And beneath it, the small D mint mark. At first, he almost ignored it. After all, how valuable could a modern penny really be? But something about the coin's sharp details caught his attention. The lettering was crisp. Lincoln's portrait looked almost sculpted. It looked perfect. So he did something most people never do. He sent the coin to be professionally graded. Weeks later, the results came back. The coin had been graded in near-perfect condition, what collectors call mint state. And suddenly, that ordinary penny wasn't worth 1 cent anymore. Depending on grade and demand, top-quality examples of the 2007 D Lincoln penny have sold for hundreds of dollars. Sometimes even more when rare qualities are present. But condition is only part of the story. Because sometimes, the real excitement comes from errors. And this is what blows collectors away. Even in modern years like 2007, mistakes still happen inside the mint. Tiny imperfections during the striking process can create coins with unusual characteristics. Off-center strikes, double die effects, die cracks, misaligned dies. Most people never notice these details. But collectors absolutely do. And when one of these rare variations appears on a 2007 D Lincoln penny, the value can jump dramatically. Imagine pulling a penny from your pocket and discovering a doubling in the letters. Or a strange shift in the design. Something that wasn't supposed to happen. Suddenly that coin isn't just spare change, it's a rarity, and collectors will compete to own it. But here's where many people make a huge mistake. They clean the coin. It seems harmless. Maybe they want to make it shine. But cleaning a coin can destroy its collector value instantly. Professional collectors want coins exactly as they left the mint. Untouched. Original. Authentic. A cleaned coin may lose most of its potential value. Sometimes in seconds. Another mistake. Spending the coin without even looking at it. Think about that for a moment. How many pennies pass through your hands every year? Hundreds? Maybe thousands? And what if one of them held hidden value? What if the difference between 1 cent and hundreds of dollars came down to a tiny detail you never noticed? That's the mystery that keeps collectors searching. Because every jar of change, every forgotten coin roll, every drawer filled with pennies could hold something extraordinary. But let's talk about the biggest factor that separates ordinary coins from valuable ones: condition. Most pennies from 2007 circulated for years. They were scratched, worn, and dulled by time. But occasionally, a coin survives untouched. Maybe it was stored in a coin roll. Maybe it sat in a collection. Maybe someone saved it without realizing its future potential. When a coin like that appears in near-perfect condition, collectors pay attention. Because perfect coins are incredibly rare. Not because they were never made, but because almost none survive that way. And this is where grading becomes important. Professional grading companies carefully examine coins under magnification. They evaluate every detail, every mark, every tiny flaw. Then they assign a grade. And that grade can mean the difference between a penny worth a few cents and a coin worth hundreds. But here's the part that surprises people the most. Sometimes the most valuable coins aren't the oldest ones. They're the rare survivors of modern years. Coins that were overlooked. Coins people assumed were worthless. Coins that quietly waited until someone noticed. And that's exactly why collectors keep searching. Because every once in a while, someone discovers something extraordinary hiding in plain sight. A coin everyone else ignored. A coin that could help pay off bills. A coin that could fund a dream. A coin that proves even the smallest things can hold incredible value. So the next time you see a penny, pause for a moment. Look at the date. Check for the mint mark. Notice the details. Because that simple coin might have a story you haven't discovered yet. And somewhere out there, another 2007 D Lincoln penny could still be waiting. Waiting in a jar of loose change. Waiting in an old coin roll. Waiting in the bottom of a drawer. And the person who finds it might just realize something powerful. Opportunities don't always arrive in obvious ways. Sometimes they arrive disguised as a single penny. So before you spend your next handful of change, take a closer look. You might be holding something far more valuable than you ever imagined. And remember this: in the world of coin collecting, discoveries happen every day. New errors appear. Hidden treasures are uncovered. and the next incredible find could belong to anyone, even you, because sometimes life-changing opportunities really do start with just 1 cent. So check your coins carefully, stay curious, and never underestimate the power of a penny.